Hey guys, welcome back. Apologies for the glitch earlier. So instead of having double Jessie, we've got single Jessie, but we have Jessie nonetheless. So welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa, I believe we're on. And we are doing an amazing deep dive into The Simpsons today. But before we do that, we have a sponsor for the show. So we have BITCHUTE, which is our sponsor. So we just want to put up their information quick, and we're going to stop in the middle of the show somewhere and just do an ad break. But yeah, BITCHUTE, they're no stranger to our channel. They're really actually amazing with their home rife machines. So it really is frequency medicine. So any of you want to check it out, we will put the link in the in the section below the description as well. And you can use my name, Chantelle, as for your coupon code, where you will get a 5% discount on your purchases. So enjoy it. They really are amazing little devices. Cool. So, as I was saying early on, we have Jessie with us, and we're going to be looking at this whole, I don't even know what to call it, okay? The fiasco in the seas of late. Isn't it interesting with all the water stuff that's been going on? You know,
Yeah.
one can't help but notice that there's some kind of deep activity going on, whether it's to do with child transportation, submersives, if you will, up to shenanigans, who's on there, what are they doing, when they connected, how many days or years after the sinking of the Titanic. I mean, it's crazy, really. You know, there's so many, and especially those of us who are seeing, we've learned over the last couple of years, especially in my case, learned how to start looking for the obvious signs, right? Which weren't so obvious before. Anyway, Jess, welcome. How are you?
Doing well. Yes. Not doing
Awesome.
any shenanigans on the sea, but there is a lot going on the sea.
Wow. Well, I would love to hear your take just before we get into the deeper Simpsony dodginess, because we know we've spoken about the Simpsons before and their predictive stuff where I know they predicted Trump coming in as president, a whole lot of other things as well, the death of the Queen, stuff like
Yeah.
that. And we're
January
seeing,
6th events and yeah.
yes, absolutely. So we're seeing a lot more of that now, and it's becoming more and more apparent. But before we get there, what is your take on this whole um, submersive stuff? Let's call it that.
Yeah.
That's been going on lately.
Well, I think first, looking, I guess my general opinion of what we're seeing is, it's my belief that The Simpsons, people like to say it's predictive or things like that. But I think what really we're seeing is that um, back in my days in the 80s and, it went well before that, but I've brought forth how, you know, one of the things that the military did was the looking glass experiments. And with that, they used children to look into the future and to, um, see in the spirit world to see what was coming or, um, with that, they wanted to be able to manipulate time and space. So, what did they do? They did lots of biofeedback, which meant that, as these children had these visions or dreams, they were writing down every detail, of what that child was experiencing, seeing, hearing, feeling, and all the things that possibly could happen. And then they began to, put the children into groups so that like I've explained how my core group of 3, I was the one that would always see it the end picture, end result. Then you had, you know, my one of the other little boys that would see, you know, kind of the step by step, the point A to point B. And then you had another one that would see the step by step point A to B, but then he also would see all the consequences of each choice or each step. So as they begin to put all those pieces together, you know, their questions were, well, if we don't want that end picture, how do, you know, what steps can we affect? Where can we start to make that change so that we can get a different result? So those are things that, you know, the government and the military began to do and use those things for. Now, as I've seen more and more of The Simpsons, you know, I have to ask is, you know, is that somehow connected um, to the Looking Glass project? And is it plausible that they're maybe putting out information that comes from, you know, Looking Glass biofeedback, and they're creating these episodes which would do two things. One, it would makes any survivor who, you know, has had those visions very uneasy, because things are being made public and there's that code to silence. But at the same time, you know, it's a way that the system has done things like that before publicly in order to keep survivors under control. You know, so there's times where they'll, you know, give pieces of your life or your experiences to Hollywood, and you'll watch it unfold in some big movie that comes out. And it's meant to intimidate, it's meant to cause fear, it's meant to keep survivors' mouths shut and keep them under control. So, you know, there is that plausibility that that is what Simpsons is, that really it's meant to, you know, keep survivors from coming forward about things.
Wow.
But that would be my initial, you know, thought about the whole Simpson connection. Well, then we get into kind of this event, and you know, it's interesting because um, aeronautical, you know, there's a lot of high connection to the aeronautical or space world, which, you know, when we define that, people automatically think, because of schooling and education, that space refers to up, you know, that it's beyond our planet, that it's out there, it's undefined things. But that's not the whole territory of space. You know, we have land that is under the surface of the earth. So we've talked about, you know, the tunnel systems. We have land that is under the oceans where there are subterranean military bases. And, you know, that land is technically not owned by anybody. Even the water itself is considered an entire territory that is considered space, because you don't have any jurisdiction or authority by any nation over those territories. Um, so, you know, aeronautical engineers and others are not just going to be bound to space in the air or beyond this planet. You know, what is the realm or the full scope of their studies? And, you know, there's a lot there. So the second thing with that is just the name of the big sponsoring companies for this event. You have Ocean Gate, which it's like we've just been talking about, you know, gateways and other things. And I don't think that it's by accident that this, you know, big company conglomerate is named Ocean Gate. You have to ask, what is their connection to spiritual gates, as well as, you know, I encourage people, look for it. You're definitely going to find that connection to the military. Many of these big companies work directly with the US military. So I think we will find that connection between Ocean Gate and the military, and we also will find that connection to high level elite
You know,
within the
I'd just
system.
like to chime in here if you don't mind, because we're seeing also a lot of crazy big, almost unrecognizable creatures emerging or surfacing from the sea recently. We're seeing a lot of stuff on that. We're also seeing whales and things fighting back. I'm not sure if that's fake news, but I don't believe it all is. So I've also spoken before about recently, even in our waters down the few kilometers down the road from me, I mean, shark attacks, killing 2 people in a short space of time, unheard of here. Sharks coming out of the water. We spoke about when we did that water military base program with you a couple of weeks back.
Mm-hmm.
We spoke about some of those creatures that they've done horrific things to. So it makes sense, when you're looking at Ocean Gate, as you say, gate, there's obviously some gateway that is either being opened or controlled or activated or entered to do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's especially when we're looking at the Simpsons and stuff as well. We're seeing these connections and how that's been predicted as well, along with a whole lot of other things. And it
Yeah.
seems somehow that they're trying to keep our eyes to the water, not above. Or maybe I've got it wrong. Instead of looking down, we're looking up. I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? It makes sense what you're saying about like the whole aeronautical sphere. It's not in the sky and out of space. It's
Mm-hmm.
in inner space as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
very interesting.
And you have some other significant things like the name of we'll call it the pod, um, but that was Titan, which, we know Titan it's not just a name of, a lowercase g god that is talked about in mythology. This is an actual name of a demonic, commanding spirit over the ocean. And, you have several. Titan is right alongside of Poseidon and, um, who are they under? Leviathan. So we have that connection, to a demonic principality that's in that area, or um, commanding spirit. And, you think about all, I watched a video on just that submersible, and, they were going over the logistics, everything that um, was with it. And we know, aeronautical engineers are just brilliant minded, um, very complex, they understand things. So one of the things that kind of struck me in this is that it was almost like a childlike simplification of things. So it was like, but beyond I mean, it was kind of the fishy type of child simplification, because you're like, why would these guys who have all this capability, why would they dumb it down to such an extent that, they don't even need to dumb it down that much? Like, the guy talking about the interior and stuff, everything that they had was on what you would consider like a gaming controller. So all of the, movement of the mechanism was on a controller. Now, when you think about that mechanically, that gets very interesting because, it means that there's no manual control of, we'll say, of the vehicle or the submersible. Why would you take out all ability to manually control? Okay,
Wow.
and just rely solely on technology in a place where you're going, where there's so much pressure. And, you would think that even just for safety, that there would be some sort of manual control. Or, I've seen like some of those underwater machines, like they'll have like a balloon that, you know, if something's kind of happening or you're getting into trouble, you know, you can push a button and basically this, you know, balloon type thing's going to release and it's going to immediately, you know, take you up towards the surface and stuff. So you have a way of escape if you need it manually. So that was one of the things. There was no manual control. Even, you know, the control board that they had was so simple. I mean, it basically was just like, as the guy said, a single button. And, you know, I mean, I'm all for simple. That sounds nice. But, you know, with all of their skills, their abilities, the things that they're looking for, you know, you have to ask why are they taking out all of the complications of this? And, you know, if they're using this for studies or research or for accessing something, you know, you would think that you would need more. Um, you know, especially if they're going deeper than they've ever gone before. You know, if they're going into uncharted territory, simple is not the way you want to go because, you know, basically you're on kind of a recon research type discovery investigation, and you're going to want to have access to, you know, because as much money as it's costing, you know, this is not a trial by error situation. You know, if they're going all the way down there, they're spending that much money, there's a reason they're going down there. They're wanting to have something that they're coming back with, whether it's knowledge, whether it's, you know, research, things that they've discovered while they're down there. So there was no plausibility really of that. You know, it's like you don't spend that type of money just to go down there to take a look. I mean, really,
It's not. Of course not.
you don't take that much money just to go take a peek, you know? So the question is, what is, you know, the true story? What really is happening? What really is going on? Um, let's come back to that. Let's take a few minutes I know there were some things you wanted to show. Let's kind of
Sure.
go there, but let's come back to that question, what we think really was
Is
going on
going
there.
on. Okay, well, we definitely, I think all of us are waiting with bated breath for that. But in the meantime, what we've done is we've actually found some very interesting little reels on whatever it is on The Simpsons. And this guy has kind of like made some connections. There's quite a few of them. But we're going to play them. They may be a minute or two each. And then Jessie's going to just give her opinion on what he's saying because he's pretty much singing off the same song sheet. Let's put it that way. But he does it pretty well. Cool.
Real friend.
Mother, please, I'm communicating with my fellow hams.
How do I talk? Push this button here. You're all losers!
Oh, which way did Mason go? That must be him over there. Stop! What do I do? Oh. Daddy! Daddy!
Mason.
Yeah, I just wanted to add. There was a boy that went on this sub because it wanted to. It was like a father and son connection. They wanted to make. Yeah, they did it. He did it for his father. So The Simpsons also, it was like a fatherly connection and everything. So there's some relevance to the whole father and son bond. And going under.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and you know, the low oxygen, but yeah, I don't even know if they had a device on there for reading oxygen
Yeah.
levels. They didn't go over that in the videos that I saw, but
Cool.
Next one.
Simpsons doesn't predict the future, they control it. Did you know that Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, may be a member of the Freemasons? In part 1, we introduced you to this theory, and now we are going to give you the evidence. The Freemasons are a secretive society that has been the subject of many conspiracy theories over the years. Many believe this group has the power to influence the world and everything that happens in it. For starters, many of the characters in The Simpsons have names that are linked to Freemasonry. For example, the character of Homer is named after the ancient Greek poet who wrote about the Trojan War. In Freemasonry, the Trojan War is a symbol of the struggle between good and evil. Additionally, there are several references to Freemasonry in various episodes of The Simpsons. For example, in one episode, Homer becomes a member of a secret society called the Stonecutters, which is clearly a parody of the Freemasons. Finally, Groening himself has admitted that he is fascinated by secret societies and conspiracy theories. In an interview with Playboy magazine, he said that he was inspired by the book The Illuminatus Trilogy, which explores the idea of a secret society that controls the world. Perhaps they don't actually predict anything. Maybe their influence is just so powerful that they are able to control what happens.
yeah. I think it's probably the later. I'm pretty positive on that.
Yeah. What do you know about Matt Groening, the creator?
I do believe that there are Freemasonry connections, but again, you know, it's beyond Freemasonry. That's really just one of the departments. What is the true, you know, connection or name? It would be the Brotherhood system. And is he Brotherhood? You know, I would say yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would definitely seem that they would have used him in that way, right?
Right?
Third video.
Yeah.
The phenomenon of The Simpsons seemingly predicting the future is no longer just dismissed as luck. Instead, it has given rise to a much darker theory that has gained significant attention and momentum. About 9 months ago, a mysterious message surfaced on Reddit, immediately capturing my interest. Despite receiving no upvotes, the replies to the post were disturbing and quickly sparked a flurry of wild conjectures. According to these responses, The Simpsons serves as a chosen medium through which the elite unveil their secret plans. The show's creator, Matt Groening, has been implicated in various events such as the alleged involvement in the Freemasonry, the death of Jeffrey Epstein, and the September 11th attacks. The range of theories is extensive, but a central question persists. How does The Simpsons exhibit such uncanny accuracy in predicting future events? Through extensive research, the collection of rare data, statistical analysis, and interviews with experts, we gradually uncovered an explanation that defies conventional wisdom. This revelation has largely gone unnoticed by the general public, yet it holds the potential to upend everything we thought we knew about The Simpsons and its intricate ties to global occurrences. Are you prepared to embark on this riveting journey into the enigma surrounding The Simpsons? In part 2, we will dive even deeper into this captivating mystery and unveil the hidden truths behind one of the most
I think there's an easy explanation for that. You know, if Matt was involved with, you know, programs within the government, the military, you know, there's individuals that I've named who were connected to documenting events and things that happened. So that, you know, there were people who would take pictures, people who filmed, you know, all of those things. They would store those things. I've talked about, you know, Aquino and how he kept a lot of that hidden, you know, from government audits under the Transformation Project. So, you know, who then had access to those records to, things that were said or documented. It's plausible
Wow.
that Matt got that access, you know, the sole
Yeah.
purpose of them being able to put it out.
But he surely would have, I mean, you know, again, when we look at how these things work, and historically from what I've seen, he would have probably, something like Tom Althouse on some level, I would imagine, been part of the system from a very young age
Mm-hmm.
and programmed to, or groomed, programmed to play the part he is now, be this gifted creator of this genius TV series. I want to say kids, but it's not even kids. Although
Right.
it's interesting because, and like South Park, it has that kid appeal. So again, it's showing me from, you know, it has that kid appeal. So kids would automatically, if they see it flashing in front of the TV, they'd automatically
Mm-hmm.
want to have a look because it's cartoon characters, right?
Right.
But when you start listening to the dialogue, it's not kid dialogue at all. So then you start realizing how they're actually using these, not, of course, when we're seeing the content that they're putting in there, it makes it that much more obvious. But
Yeah.
they would kind of use it maybe sporadically. The rest of the time, there'd be cool, funny things that aren't really related to anything. But then suddenly they would drop a bomb in there, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And then but by now they're also brainwashing kids, because I remember when my son was young, I did not want him watching that stuff. And we had our biggest fights about South Park, right?
Mm-hmm.
So immediately it draws in, I think, because it's kids with smart mouths, on the edge. They know a lot. You know what I'm saying? If you think of the dialogue, very
Yeah.
interesting.
The Simpsons was even before the South Park. Simpsons are like the original. It came like in the 80s, beginning of the 80s. So they've been going strong for like, I'm just a little bit older than the Simpsons.
Mm-hmm.
And they've carried that whole generation through. So they're not even targeting, they're targeting basically my generation, like our 30s, 30, 40s, our children through that, because we get entertained, because we can still look at it. And so it's very well designed. And now I'm thinking, is Matt Groening the mastermind behind it? Or is he just he's just the creator
I think
of the
it's
ideas
the
they're giving?
Yeah.
It's the output. It's the output.
And it's a further way of the system to hide things, because, you know, everything is classified under kind of creator content, you know, more of that artistical side of things. And people don't think of, you know, the authority, the jurisdiction, the legal complications and all that, is that, you know, basically this is how they're getting away with stuff. You know, if they make it seem like it's fake, it's not real, you know, it's just us expressing our creator content. Yes, there's similarities, but there'll be little shifts or changes, so you can't say 100%, you know, that was predicting that full event, right? Because there'll be little differences. So in that, you know, nobody can hold them accountable for any crimes or the preparation of any crimes. And think of that, you know, the big word in that is preparation. You know, what is their full job? Is it to, you know, remind those who have been brought up in the system, who are connected to these end time events, of the things that they're preparing, that the system itself is preparing us all for? You know, how many years have they spent in preparation? You know, well over 100, 200 years, well over that. You know, and over and over and over again, they go over these events, they go over these timelines, they, you know, they make the plan and they expect us all to simply fall in line with it, to accept it for what it is, and not to really have any understanding or knowledge or wisdom or any offense or defense against that plan.
It's very interesting because Kerry Saint here, who's the Australian, our guest on adoption, she says, I know this sounds, where's Kerry's message now? It just disappeared. A whole lot came. Okay. But what about the Flintstones, Freemasonry and adoption, right? So again, that would be definitely that kind of programming. Wow. It's just been in the web all the time. You know, the more we see it, the more we can start understanding that. Incredible. Yeah.
Well, there's definite, there's definite courses that are required for every individual in the system. And, it's built in as your educational program where, in your education, you get the basics, the math, the science, the literature, and, they decide what goes into that. But once you go to, beyond your elementary and high school years, what are the classes that are required of everybody, even though, they're considered part of your prereqs. You have philosophy and, literature's always in there. You learn about archaeology, which is going to go along with some of those philosophical views of, extra, what we consider writers, which then gets into the myths, the, Homer and the others. And, it just gets interesting. The other course that usually is always a prereq for a lot of these individuals has to do with drama, where, they'll be part of the drama clubs, part of the course where they're learning to act. They're learning about speaking, posture, all of those things. And I think that that's key in some of this stuff is that, through these courses, or world events, that you have things so calculated that it literally is like a script. And, that's how they're getting away with it, is because, they can say, oh, it's not real. We were just, acting, or this is, it was just pretend.
Coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Very, very interesting. Okay.
Played another video. The next video.
The Simpsons predicted the Titanic submarine that is currently lost at sea. They actually predicted its fate years before it even happened. That's right. The popular animated TV show had an episode where a submarine, similar to the currently missing Titanic submarine, was trapped under the ocean. In the episode, the submarine was discovered by a group of explorers who were amazed to find it intact, despite being underwater for quite some time. However, just like the Titanic submarine, this submarine had been trapped under the ocean and was unable to resurface. One of the writers for The Simpsons even went on the same Ocean Gate voyage. Many people believe that The Simpsons' prediction was more than just a coincidence. Some even think that the show has a knack for predicting major events in history. From the election of Donald Trump to the Ebola outbreak, The Simpsons have made many eerily accurate predictions. So, was it just a lucky guess or something more? Perhaps they don't just predict the future, maybe they actually control it. To learn more secrets of humanity, visit our profile to get a free ebook bundle.
What do you say to that, Madame?
Yeah, I think, like we said, I think it's beyond predictions. I think that there's access to high-level military programs. And, in that, let's bring forward a word with it. what is really behind the scenes. We have individuals that, beyond science are trying to play and mess with time. And in a way, they're trying to be God, trying to control and be sovereign over that time. And
Yeah.
really behind that is witchcraft, that, they're using Solomonic black magic to manipulate and to try to, weather or direct where time is going and where humanity is going within that time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about this picture. King
Yeah, speaking of
Solomon's sword.
Solomon, yeah, Solomon Shemer, it is very uncanny, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very similar.
Similar.
Because that one
But
could
And
munch through
even,
rock, right?
yeah, even the number of eyes on it is 5, which is how many passengers there were.
was inside. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we talk about gates and portals, and was it one ritual?
Right. So that's the question, if there, and again, we're going to speculate here. We don't have positives, but, was it an attempt to create, since a lot of the spiritual gates, we'll say the majority of the spiritual gates are closed. All of the big ones have been closed since 2018. But were they trying to access something, or were they trying to create something? Some of the interesting things as we think about that is how many people are needed in a ritual. We'll say, just your typical um, ritual for opening a spiritual gate. Uh, you would have 5 to 7 Masonic men. Um, in that, these men are going to prepare before the ritual. They're going to cleanse, they're going to bathe themselves, they're going to submerge themselves in water. And, is it plausible to make, a massive portal in the water that, where you're cleansing before you go in and you're getting that open? I would say that is plausible. Um, so we're looking at some of those things, and, is it possible that they basically were creating their own portal or access point? And, was there maybe more to it? With things that are coming up, you know, are there elite or people who are trying to avoid prosecution, who are trying to hide the crimes that they've been involved? What's the easiest way to, basically not get caught? Well, it's to make it look like you've died or passed away. Um, so in that, the plausibility is if they opened a gate for escape, we know there has to be an outlet. There has to be somewhere where they ended up. And, is it plausible to be in the Atlantic Ocean and end up in the Pacific? It is. It's absolutely plausible. In fact, there's even submarine lines that run all the way from the Pacific to the Atlantic. So I encourage people, there was an interesting event that happened that day as well off the Pacific Ocean. And is there a connection between the two events? There very well might be a connection there.
Can you tell us what that event was? Can you point us in the direction of where to look?
Yeah. So the direction is that, there's reports that U.S. Navy SEALs on, January 18th rescued hundreds of children from the hold of an oil tanker off of San Francisco. So you can look
Wow.
into that. And there just may be a connection between the two.
Wow. Okay. Well, we will certainly look into that because it's all about connecting the dots. But anyway, guys, before we go further, if we can just take an ad break here for 2 minutes, please, and come back to this very interesting literal deep dive.
Healing a severe case of brain damage. This is a little bit of the story of Alex, who has been my client for 6 months now. Alex was operated on 27 years ago for a brain tumor that removed part of his right brain, followed by chemotherapy, and he was hospitalized for over a year. When he was discharged, the doctor said he wouldn't last long. He was suffering from epilepsy and the medication was leaving him drowsy and apathic. We started weekly 1-hour treatments with a spooky plasma central. At first for his epilepsy, so he would be able to stop his medication altogether. After 3 months, it improved so much that we moved on to various nerve restoration programs. That was when he first noticed in his yoga sessions that he could bend a lot better and move a lot better. And his improvement started to get noticed by others wondering what he was doing. At that time, he decided to buy an exam starters kit and do contact and remote sessions at home. But momentarily, he is making his own presets and even started to treat his elderly parents. He got really enthusiastic about Spooky too, and the people in the village, noticing the difference in him, showed more interest. So much that recently a friend of his bought a basic kit to treat himself on his long journeys as an international truck driver. When asked about the difference before and now, he points to the fact that he has more self-confidence, mentally and physically, has a better memory, and can now raise his arm above his head, whereas before it was stuck to his chest. He can walk down the stairs normally, hold things with his left hand to help his right hand, and he turned into a quick walker.
The world is bound together with love. Spooky will continue to spread love wherever we go.
Always nice seeing miracles like that, that's for sure. Wow, so back to our very interesting Simpsons deep dive, literally. I'm just happy I wasn't on that little Titan. We'll just stay in the Arrow camp.
Yes.
They're like, who designed this? A man?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, yes, so we just check it into the Simpsons, seeing their connection, what's happening, and it really is. It just makes perfect sense that, you know, as you're talking about the Looking Glass project, where they're using kids mainly, right? I don't think I've ever heard you talk about adults. Why is it kids they're using and not adults? Why is that?
I think that there are adults that are used in it as well, and I think that, you know, some of the individuals that started off as children, that then you become more advanced, and with that the visions are quickened, you know, and so they continue to get information from that and go back, add to events that they may have already documented, as more information is given.
Wow.
Yeah, so I guess I would say the reason I've only really talked about the kids with it is because I want to point out, you know, that we have our U.S. military using children in projects and experiments.
And I'm sure a lot of the adults then would have also been kids or at least younger than what they were now. I mean, I don't know when did they start using kids in these experiments? The gateway, the mind control. Do we know?
I believe it was in the 1960s, somewhere between 57 and 63 is when, you know, they received the information about more of the detailed stuff for the spiritual gates. And that was where we saw the big push for the programs starting to come out after World War II there.
Sure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, crazy. Okay, well, is there one more, Morné? Yeah?
Yes, there's one more.
Okay.
Cool.
Simpsons planned yet another major event. Yes, planned, not predicted. The Mormon cricket outbreak in Elko, Nevada. In one particular episode, an eerie storyline unfolded. It depicted an invasion of giant caterpillars terrorizing the town of Springfield. Seems far-fetched, right? Well, fast forward to the year 2023, and something unimaginable happened in the real world. In the vast deserts of Nevada, a swarm of Mormon crickets emerged, engulfing the landscape in a plague-like nightmare. Locals were left stunned and bewildered by the relentless onslaught of these ravenous insects. Coincidence? Some may say so, but The Simpsons' uncanny ability to predict such an obscure event raises questions about the nature of time and reality itself. So, as you delve deep into the mysterious world of The Simpsons, remember that sometimes supposed predictions may actually have a darker agenda. What do you think? Is it all simply luck? Or do they actually have an influence over what happens in the future? To unlock secrets of humanity, visit our profile for a free ebook bundle.
Interesting.
So is
Yeah.
it just the ability to predict? And no, I think it's far beyond.
You guys, I think it's beyond a secret right now. It's mainstream that even if you're not in the know, you know that Simpsons predicts, because there's been there's been so many predictions. There's so many memes out there. So it's almost like they're having fun with us, huh? It's almost like they're having fun with us. It's like playing with us.
Yeah.
Like a cat with a mouse. That's how I feel about
Yeah. So as you say, Jess, I mean, do they control it? Do they predict it, or do they control it? So there's not really much that they, well, through the predictions they control it, don't they? So it's synonymous, right? Goes hand in hand.
Absolutely, hand in hand.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think, I don't know, Morné, is there any more of those that we have?
No, that's the last one.
All right, cool.
What's the last one?
Yeah, so basically, in a nutshell, regarding the Simpsons, we can be well aware that they certainly play a role in, as we said, predicting and therefore creating the future. Does it help, say, for example, I mean, just from what you've experienced there and what you're seeing now in the world, to not watch this stuff? Is it just these kinds of things we stop watching or stop allowing our kids to watch? But there again, there's so many other little traps, right? So what's the solution here?
I think, I mean, that really is an easy trap to fall into. People want to know what's going to happen or what's going to unfold. So they begin to watch it so that they can know what's going to happen. And in that, really, it becomes where we then are using that show or that program almost as an oracle, where we're looking to that to tell us the future and to predict what's about to happen. And scripture says that is a form of witchcraft when we are looking to that for our answer instead of looking to God. So in that, I think really, we need to, one, address the issue. Like, what is the issue? The issue is that we feel like if we don't know, that we won't be prepared. So how do we become prepared and rest in the Lord without knowing what's going to happen? There's an element of trust there in our relationship with God that we need to develop more. we need to not be afraid to not have all the answers or to not know exactly what's going to happen, and to trust in his sovereignty that, we don't need to be afraid of death. We don't need to be afraid of disaster. And the power in that is when we realize, we can start practicing spiritual disciplines like remembering the power of God. When I get afraid about those things, thinking, man, I'll never be prepared enough for all the disasters that possibly could happen. I start to think back that, one of my favorite stories is of Elijah and the Tishbite woman, or Elisha and the Tishbite, where, her and her son are about ready to make their last, they got their last bit of flour, their last bit of oil, they're going to make a cake, and they're preparing to die. And Elijah comes and he says, make me a cake. And so they use the last bit of bread to feed him. But then in that, what's the miracle? For that 3 years of famine, their flour and their oil jar never ran dry. And, the widow and her son and Elijah ended up surviving. And God, performed a miracle in
Yeah.
that situation so that they could survive. So, when we are using, predictions or turning to these oracles to kind of, it's like a fake Band-Aid. We're applying a fake Band-Aid to make us feel like we're more prepared. But in that, we're losing out on the blessings and the miracles that God has for us to walk out in those situations.
But what they've been doing with these types of programs, let's say since the 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my son was born in the 80s, so I know it's from round about there that I remember the Simpsons and stuff being around.
Mm-hmm.
But by putting these scenes in, like let's say the futuristic scenes that the Gateway kids call it, because the Gateway experiment is really the basis of this type of, because what they're doing there is they opening the kids up to an expanded or not expanded, magnified power of suggestion, right? So they're expanding what might naturally be theirs, but be there already theirs, but they're amplifying it to an almost distorted perspective where they're now using these kids in abnormal ways. So these kids would have then, let's say, maybe seen the outcome. They then create the Simpsons and South Park and whatever else, put these snippets of information in there. And in that way, subtly, actually mind controlling the viewer, because you're already planting that seed that's going to happen in the future, right? So it's such a subtle, subconscious, manipulative process. And I'm pretty damn sure, Jessie, they know how these things work. We know that just from doing the Gateway experience. And seriously, if any of you haven't watched our interviews with Jessie prior on the Gateway experience, please do, because they really, what they do is they take our God-given gifts and they exploit them and they turn them, they use them, and they literally implode them, if that's the word, on the kids, and turning kids into military weapons, literally. Not guns, maybe sometimes, I don't know, but more like very psychic, remote viewing, all sorts of things like that, which is not natural. So it's a forced sense. It's a forced process, which exactly then it's manipulative, it's predictive, right? So they can create that for themselves, although I guess they wouldn't have 100% for sure that it's going to happen. So they have to plant the little seeds along the way. In that way, kind of just doing the subtle mind control. I don't know. What's your take on that?
No, I think you're right on with that. That is one of the ways that they are using that.
Yeah, there's a few predictions that didn't come true as well. So as there's a lot that they predicted, but there's a few that didn't come true. So
Well, Jessie, what's your take on that? Do they deliberately put predictions in there that don't come true? Or from what you know and understand about this, have some of those predictions they've put in there that haven't come true, were they meant to come true or were they not meant to come true? So were they really just, again, screwing with our minds?
Or you do have what we call the layered effect, where similar incidences can happen, over time, where you have, an incident that first is, like it, and those elements of that instance came out. And then later down the road, you can have a very similar instance, but then the things that hadn't come true in the other one then come true in that one. So you have the layered predictions.
Jeez,
That's how I would say that usually goes.
Wow. Wow. What is your take on this latest movie? And I know we kind of almost out of time, but I don't know, is there anything else you wanted to say on The Simpsons before I move on to that?
That was good. Yeah, that was a good coverage of that.
Yeah. So what is your take on this latest movie with Jim Caviezel? Caviezel?
Yeah, I think it's Caviezel.
Yeah. On the movie, I think it's called
Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom. And obviously him previously being the star of The Passion of the Christ, where he played Jesus. And especially being directed by Mel Gibson, who is a well-known voice for child trafficking. I mean, Mel Gibson has been talking about this for a long, long time. And that's one of the reasons I do believe he was cancelled in Hollywood. Now, he's also coming out doing a 4-part documentary on the pedophile rings in Hollywood and in the upper echelon. At the same time, Jim Caviezel is coming out with his movie on child trafficking, apparently on the 4th of July. So I'm wondering, and of course, we're always getting very, very mixed reviews on these topics, because some are saying, ooh, awesome, they're coming out. Others are saying, well, this is a cover, and it's keeping us diverted from other things that are going on, which, please, before we finish, I want to we're going to talk about that Link, one of the movies that has been cancelled during this time. But I don't want to divert too much now. So Jessie, but before we go there, what's your take on all of this?
Yeah, I think you have a mix of both, but at the heart of it, I think all of us, we're awake enough now where we realize that human and child trafficking is one of the biggest issues of our time. It's not something that was back just in the days of the Romans, or during the time of the slave trade. It's happening now in our time, our day and age, and it's a problem that is so big that it has to be addressed. And the questions is who is really addressing that issue? And I applaud any survivors who have experienced those things, who are coming out. Do I believe that Mel Gibson was well aware of those things that are happening, and that he's been trying to be a voice, bringing out information about it, creating awareness? Absolutely. You see things where I think, because of his fighting against the system, there were things where that really affected his life. And, now we see him kind of coming back to this place where he's sharing more about everything that is happening and experiencing. But, in the back of my mind as a survivor, and, is always that question, like, how do we know for sure that people are fully out? How do we know that they've gotten out? And, so I think it's great that they're creating this movie, but I think that, some of the individuals surrounding him, some of the people that are coming alongside of for this, there's still that question of what exactly is going on. Is this being used for cover? Is this leverage for freedom for someone or something, beyond the children that they're displaying? And one of my biggest concerns is that, it is so hard to get these expendable children out. They are set apart by the system for death. And the system doesn't care about the how or when necessarily. But once they've, made an offering to the spirits, those spirits are demanding that life of that child. It doesn't matter if they get saved or rescued. There's still that fight for that child because that spirit is demanding the sacrifice. So, how is all that playing out? How do, I don't hear necessarily these individuals talking about that spiritual aspect or that warfare that, naturally should be occurring. So, so I have questions as to whether, there's more to this story. Is it plausible that it is being used to cover up or, kind of to make us believe one thing when really another is going on?
I think it can be good in both ways, actually. The way I see things like this, people, my comment on this was, in order to know the dark, to truly know the dark, you need to become the dark, right? And I mean, I look at people like yourself that spent that time literally in hell. I look at a number of other survivors and overcomers I've spoken to in the last number of years who maybe as little as 5 or 10 years ago, I might have thought they were the most despicable human beings that ever walked this earth because of some of their actions that they did. But yet they've come out, they've seen the light, and they're blowing the whistle. And they're exposing this. So I say, as much as what Lucy has his dodgy little spies all over, so God also has his spies that go into these places and really have to understand what these people are doing so that we understand and know and therefore can counteract it, because we can't counteract these actions with bullets and shields. We can't. It's spiritual awareness, and it's an awakening of our consciousness. And our consciousness is really how we think, our self-awareness. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so if we are walking around eyes wide shut, we're never going to know. So I really see people like these, whether they're still officially serving the Dark Lord or not. I'm saying part of the diversion is we get caught up in all of that. Well, he's this and he's that and that one. And can you see this and what? Yes, of course they had to be in the system. They had to have been in the system. We know that, right? Question is, are they bringing this information to us to educate us? How many people on the mainstream level is this actually waking up right now? A lot of people are going to start seeing this. And whether it's a diversion from that side or not, it's still creating an awareness for a lot of people, because this topic now is becoming much more mainstream. So I always want to say, don't shoot the messenger, hear the message. Does that message resonate with you? Is it a valid topic that the layman on earth, who has not been so ignorant to these atrocities, is it doing good by awakening them and people going, hey, actually, I've now been seeing too much of this? Because more and more YouTube channels as well, as I've said before, it's really cool that they're actually exposing a lot of the celebrities and things, So it is a topic that's coming to the fore. I don't know. What is your take on that?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right, especially the second part that, I think it is something that we need to be aware of. And, the more aware of we are of how it's happening, how it's operating, the more we can do about that. So, for that fact that it is giving us information, that gives it a type of value. And I would encourage people, there is a lot more about this that we can't discuss here today, but timothycharleshomeseth.com has been putting out a lot about this. And, you can go and read more about what he's been bringing out about the movie, about those involved with it. And, I think it's good to, you know, look, read, research for yourself, pray, ask the Lord to show you, what his desire is for you in this situation. I know, I've seen a lot of people, they're debating, should I see the movie? Should I not? They don't want to support something if funds are going to support, or keep children further in bondage. So I think, look into it, ask the Lord to give you that wisdom as to whether you should see it or not.
Absolutely. It's such a personal journey,
Yeah.
Each one of us, it's so personal, so I think it really is an important time because, yes, we're being thrown all sorts of curveballs from every direction. And I really do see this as, what was that movie, Hunger Games, is some type of
Yeah.
Hunger Games simulation on a much bigger scale. It's quite funny, actually. But what did come to my attention, and one of the people, I do believe it could have even been on Twitter. No, it wasn't on Twitter. I can't remember where, I'm sorry. But sent me this link. And at the time that all of this new sinking of things is happening and new movies coming out, this one, in the meantime, has been cancelled. So they sent me a link, but it's to the trailer of that. I don't know, Morné, can you maybe just play it for a second and just post it? Because this is really a documentary that they were doing on 8 transgendered, I want to call them children, teenagers, who've had really, really detrimental health effects. And it's absolutely backfiring. So, of course, this get cancelled while everything else is. And I know, it's not the full movie, it's the trailer, but you can link in and follow people. And really, please just get this message out as well. If we can just do that, see what's behind the curtain as well, and get that out there, because that's usually the very important stuff that they're trying to hide. So I don't know if you can play that for a sec for us, Morné.
Cool. Yeah.
Oh, Morné, you may want to stop it and restart and hit that little sound button down
Is
on
it
the
not
bottom left. There was no sound with it.
I'm going to try again.
There we go.
I know it doesn't have sound.
There should be, when you click on the share thing, is there a little button you push for the sound? Like share
No,
sound?
it usually just plays it normally. But I can put the link in the comments quickly for that, for the people.
Okay. All right. Well, Morné is going to put the link in. So if you guys can please just check that out.
Yeah.
Really important information. I was receiving information yesterday from someone here, and things are getting hairy in South Africa. One of the schools in Cape Town has sent an email, and I want to just find the wording quickly, to students. I want to just read this. Camps Bay High School in Cape Town sent emails to parents telling them to identify themselves as caregivers. So parents now have to identify themselves as caregivers and not as parents. Kids are not to call their parents mom or dad, but caterers. Can you believe that?
Yeah, no.
And,
I'd be like,
really what they're
no.
doing now is the education system here. There's also, I watched quite a long video clip on it. They are absolutely crunching down on the schools, bringing in this horrific agenda. And even in homeschooling, you're restricted. Even homeschooling, they're now bringing in these agendas to restrict. No, I tell you, they've got our government.
Got to say no to that. You know,
Yeah,
it's all
yeah,
about
absolutely.
authority and jurisdiction, and you know, parents, we need to not lose rights over our children as minors and the rights to make decisions for them, you know, what is right and what is not. You know, if we're not doing it as parents, then who is? You know, it's our states, our countries trying to take that control away from us.
And I like that. And I was also and I was going to say that because what you said there was so important. And what Ella's saying, remember authority and jurisdiction. Absolutely. You know, to stand up and say, absolutely not. And of course, I'm up in arms and speaking to my grandbaby's mama. I'm like, what is going on there? So, no, it's still all good there where they are. But it's obviously creeping in. And I've got to tell you guys, the Democratic Alliance here, who's the opposition to the African National Congress, which is now the supposed combination of white and black people. So we quite liberal and what have you. But I want to tell you, these guys are full-on Freemasons. They are, and I know I'm going to get crapped on. I call them the new nationalist party. Really, it's the English nationalist party. And of course, anyone who knows about anything about South African politics knows that the nationalist party were the enforcers of apartheid for 40-odd years. And the Democratic Alliance, I don't care what anyone says, these guys absolutely are, even though they're opposing the ANC and they come in with all their beautiful and intelligent discussions and what have you, they're very much enforcing the New World Order as well. And we're very much forcing down lockdowns, masks, zappity-doos. And of course, the Democratic Alliance rules the Western Cape, right? So they get to say where I live. And that, of course, was always the, you know, kind of more trendy and what have you, you know, we cool people in the Western Cape until we see the Democratic that rules us, and now we see what's happening in our schools. So we've got to be so aware, and gosh. And if you guys saw on the drop-in I did as well with the kids in the Congo, the DRC, being carried around in bags to be trafficked, mothers dropping them off. And that's where they're mining all the cobalt, uranium. Is it uranium? Lithium, lithium. For your cell phones and your computers and your laptops and your iPhones, that's where it comes from. So we have to just think about these things very seriously. I don't know what the solution is, but we just have to become aware. I think that's the first thing we need to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool. Jess, is there anything else that you want to say before we end off in prayer?
No, I think a great show, and keep your eyes open. Stuff is happening. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Cool.
All right. Well, let's pray. Holy Father, we just thank you for the awareness. We thank you for the things that you are showing us in light of all that is happening around us. And I just pray a special blessing over all those listening today, that you would give us courage, that you would give us the fortitude to go forth and to make a difference and a change, not only in our homes, but in our communities, in our states, in our countries, Lord. We ask that you would show us what the children need, that you would show us how to pray, that you would show us how to make those changes that need to happen, and let us not be afraid to rattle things up, to shake things up a bit, and to get things moving. We ask this in your powerful name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Jess.
Yep.
And again, thank you, Morné, and thank you to our amazing viewers for supporting our show and watching and sharing and liking and subscribing and commenting. You know, these are such important shows to watch, guys. So please just share far and wide. I think, you know, really people need to see this stuff and just start unlocking that which has been locked through conditioning. Anyway, okay, cool. And again, thank you so much. We had a who was the lady, Morné, that gave us a sticker today? Stacey. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you. And to all our Patreons, again, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And as a reminder that we have our book club with Jessie on Sunday, 3 p.m., 9 a.m. Jessie time. And that is, we're doing your book.
Kingdom Comes in
Power.
That's right. His Kingdom Comes in Power, sorry. And so any of you would like to join that for the Patreons, that'll be 3 p.m. our time, 9 a.m. Jessie on Sunday. In the meantime, we will see you on Friday with Lera Nikolaev at 5 p.m. our time. And until then, God bless you all. Take good care of yourselves, and we will see you very, very soon. Thank you, Jess. Good morning.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.